Thanks for joining me. I have a very special guest on the show today, and it's Dana K. White. She wrote How to Manage Your Home, and she has a new book out, Jesus Doesn't Care About Your Messy House. It's an amazing book. I absolutely love the spiritual message of it, and you need to hear that, trust me. But there's cleaning motivation interwoven in the book. And I've also been listening to her podcast since at least 2013. So without further ado, I'm going to have Dana talk to you about decluttering.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me on. This is fun.
Great to have you. So what advice would you give to people who are just overwhelmed and their kitchen's a mess, their living room's a mess, they've got piles of laundry everywhere and just don't know where to begin?
Yeah. I mean, just to be clear, any advice that I give on that is all based on full on understanding of what that's like, because that's where I started, right? I was messy from birth. Every space that I ever had was messy. And so the thing I would say in that situation is start with the dishes. And it feels like, I just had an email from somebody, I think yesterday, who was like, I know you always said do the dishes. And I was like, yeah. And then I went, oh, wait, but I'm not doing them. Like they realized, like, oh, that's so obvious. But then they weren't actually doing it. And when they actually did it, it changed things. So my story is that my house was a wreck. I started a blog secretly, didn't tell anybody what I was doing. It was anonymous. It didn't use my real name or anything, about getting my house under control. And I was like, I know this is not hard for other people. I have observed that some of my friends, I can show up at their house and they're not embarrassed to open the front door. Like I am always embarrassed to open the front door, right? And I go into their house, and inside their house, their kitchen is perfectly fine, right? And so I was like, I know that for me, when I say I got to clean my house, which is all the time, but when I say I got to clean my house, I start in the kitchen, and it takes me hours to dig my way out of the mess. And I never get past the kitchen because I use up all my time and all my energy in the kitchen. And so therefore my house never actually gets clean. And so I was like, I have got to figure out how to keep my dishes done. And so I literally was like, that was the smallest thing I could think of to do, because I was so sure I was going to fail because I tried so many times to get my house under control. So doing the dishes every day truly changed my home. Okay. And when I say dishes every day, I had no concept of the impact that would have, and I had no concept of the time that would take. The reason that I didn't know all this before I started, right? But as I was writing about it while I was doing this, I realized that I had assumed doing the dishes every day would take at least an hour. And I could justify that I did not have an hour. Like I shouldn't do that right now because I don't have an hour to spend on dishes, right? But the reason I thought it took an hour was that I would wait until all my dishes were dirty, and it would take me 5 hours. And I was like, well, okay, it's been 5 days. It took me 5 hours. Then clearly divide that by 5, it would be an hour every day. But that's not how dishes work. Dishes math doesn't work like regular math, right? It doesn't follow logical sense. Instead, it's a matter of, if I do them every day, it takes 10 or 15 minutes, because if I wait a day, it takes an hour, because now everything I have to move it around. It doesn't all fit in one sink load, like whatever the situation. And then if I wait 3 days, now there's dishes everywhere and it's this big mess and it takes hours. And so doing maintenance stuff before you are at a point where it makes any sense to do maintenance stuff is actually the thing that's going to change your home if you're completely overwhelmed. For me, that was shocking, because I was always like, why would I do maintenance things? Because I don't want to maintain this, right? Like I need to get my house perfect, and then it'll make sense to focus on maintaining. Where in reality, the focusing on things like doing a daily pickup and doing dishes actually immediately started to change my home, and then allowed me to get through the house and do all the things that were the big project that I wanted to do.
Right. And that's why I want our listeners to listen to your show as well, because you get into more of the philosophical reasons behind what some of us are doing and not doing, whereas our show is more like we're literally talking them through the process and keeping them on task. But I feel like they need both. And a lot of us wait until we see a mess to clean. I talked about this in a recent episode, but I got up in the morning and I was feeling like I should give myself a pat on the back because my kitchen was clean. But then I was like, wait a second. You need to empty the dishwasher. You need to empty your drying rack. You need to wash that one bowl that somebody left in the sink last night. Like, don't be complacent and wait until you have a mess to clean.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to, like, I am an overthinker. And so I always wanted to be able to think through the whole scenario, how it was going to go, and how it was all going to play out before I get started. But every time I would try to implement my plan, my big fancy, dramatic plan, and I failed again, I was like, well, that didn't work. I got to throw that out. Instead, the thing that actually made the difference was doing the dishes. Right? Like, instead of coming up with a big fancy plan of how I'm going to keep my dishes done. This is what I'm going to do every day after such and such time. I'm going to do this. Well, then real life happens and it doesn't always work that way. But instead, just saying, I don't have the very best way to do the dishes. I'm just going to do the dishes. And then as I did them every day, I started to realize, like, for me, I always thought this habit of doing the dishes meant getting to the point where I didn't realize I had done the dishes. Oh my goodness. What? My dishes are done. I must have done them. That's such a habit now. Like, that's how I thought habits had to work. And instead, in reality, I still have to talk myself into it. But I am able to do that because I know for a fact the impact that it has and the actual, like, stop everything, impact that it has if I don't do them. Like, I know that my house hinges on the kitchen staying under control, and the kitchen staying under control hinges on the dishes being done every day. So it's like, it kind of takes advantage of my overthinking, but it's all based in actual experience now. But I couldn't gain that experience until I went ahead and did it.
I like that. And what it boils down to, there's no magical system. You've got to do the work, but you've got to change your mindset. And that's where your books come in, and your podcast, and our podcast too. You've got to change what you're doing, because the way you're doing it, listener, isn't working for you right now. And it's because you have like a project mentality. Talk more about that, because I know that that's something that you like to bring up, is that you don't want to have a project mentality about your housework.
Yeah. So a big part of the disconnect for me of, the reason why my house was such a source of shame and frustration to me was that I can do things. Like, I'm competent and I would do well in my professional jobs, and was able to tackle a big project and like, I used to direct plays, so I can organize 150 people who all have to be in specific place. I can organize people. I'd always say I can organize people, but I can't organize stuff. Like, I don't know what the difference is here, but because I do really well at projects, I was always trying to take what worked in other situations and apply that to my house, because I was like, this is my wheelhouse, like, projects are my wheelhouse. So if I treat my house that way, which meant I would think I needed this big plan, and then implement the plan. And the other part with projects that I really enjoy is being done with them and being able to sit back and go, that project is done. And because my projects were often, plays, they also had applause. And I really love applause. Like, that was always the fun part of it, right? Housework definitely has no applause. And housework is not a project. My house is not a project. And so, because I had that mentality that I need to tackle this project of my house, that was why I was always putting it off. Because I was like, okay, I need an entire weekend to clean it from top to bottom. And then I will, do that. Well, once I had kids, I used to, before I had kids, I would do the top to bottom cleans for the entire weekend, completely wear myself out. And it would always go back to being a disaster because I hadn't actually decluttered. And so all the stuff that I had, cleaned up was just shoved in all these different places. But what was I talking about? I'm sorry. I think I've done this in every podcast.
I've been like, might be getting to, like,
yeah,
is maybe the container concept.
Yeah. So the project of my house, I kept putting it off because it became more daunting. The container concept is one of those things that I honestly, if I was not writing about it on my blog, I don't think I would teach this concept. And it is literally the most transformational concept for people. And they will, people are like, my mind is blown. I can't believe I didn't understand this. But it's one of those things that people who are naturally organized don't know needs to be explained to somebody like me, right? Like I don't see limits. It's a wonderful quality, right? But it did not work well in my home. And the container concept is that space is finite. And a container's purpose is not for putting things in. It is to serve as a limit. Okay, so it's to serve as a boundary. And once I realized, a container is meant to contain, it freed me from making value decisions about all my stuff, meaning, is this a good thing? Yes, it's great. Do I like it? Absolutely, I love it. Might I ever use it? Oh, yeah. I, of all people, could come up with all the reasons and all the ways I could use this thing in the future, right? And so when I was making my decisions about clutter in that way, I was keeping everything. But the reality is my house was completely out of control because I had more stuff than I had space. And so realizing containers are meant to serve as limits made me realize, okay, well, I can put my favorite things in there first, and then the container decides how much I get to keep. So I can't keep everything. I can keep anything, but I can't keep everything, right? And so as I work on my house and embrace that, I realized it's not just buckets and baskets and bins that are containers. It's every shelf, every drawer limits how much stuff can be in there. And then as I decluttered and got to this point where I only had what would fit usably and functionally in those spaces, then I realized, I can keep this under control because things actually have a place to go. I never understood when people would say a place for everything and everything in its place. I was like, that's a nice concept, but I don't have places for everything in my home. And so I look back and I go, okay, I should have gotten that, but it wasn't being explained to me, this container concept. Like there are limits. There is no possible way to keep a house under control when you have so much stuff that you don't have the space to actually put it. Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on laundry? If someone tends to wash and dry the clothes, but then not fold them and put them away, what is your solution for that?
So I do want to say that I got laundry under control before I got to the point where I would get everything put away. So I just want to say, like, if you're resistant to the fold it straight out of the dryer and put it away, which is literally home transformational, it will transform your home if you'll do that. I did get laundry under control before I started doing that. Now, laundry under control meant we did have clean underwear every day, right? Like, we maybe had to go to the love seat and dig around till we found the right pair, but we did have, so it's worth it, even if you're like, I'm never gonna fold straight out of the dryer. But once I started folding straight out of the dryer and would time it, because I thought well, surely, because I didn't like doing it, surely that takes me an hour every time, right? Like it feels that way. But when I actually timed it, I was like, it takes me less than 10 minutes. Basically on any load, it takes me less than 10 minutes. And it is a valuable use of my time to go ahead and fold it and go put it away, because then it's done. It's like it disappears. And a lot of times when I'm talking to somebody who struggles and is like, I don't know, I'm doing all these things and my house is still messy. And, we'll stumble upon the fact that their furniture in the living room is covered in clean clothes. And I'm like, well, the way to solve that is to fold it straight out of the dryer and go ahead and take it and put it away. And will make a huge difference in the overall feeling of your home being under control.
Yeah, now that my youngest kids are teenagers and everybody's doing their own laundry, I'm just doing my laundry and my husband's laundry. So we're doing it straight out of the dryer now. But there were years where we had a clean pile, kind of a perpetual clean pile. And so I know a lot of people must struggle with that because I did.
Yeah. And I'm a big fan of laundry day. You know, most of the people who teach this stuff really like the load a day method, which if that works for you, then that's exactly what you should be doing. But I tried, because I was very experimental when I was, anonymously just writing what I was trying to do in my house. I wasn't teaching anybody anything. I was trying the load a day thing, but what I would realize is I would wash the same load 6 times because I would start the day like, okay, yes, that's right, I've got to wash a load of clothes. That's the thing. And then I would never think about it again until the next day when I went to go wash a load of clothes. And then I was like, oh, I left it in there. Now it smells a little. I've got to wash it again, And so I'd just rewash and rewash and rewash and never make any progress. So for me, a laundry day actually works better. It is easier for me to have, this is my focus today. Laundry is the thing for today. Not that I didn't do other things because, but it just kept me on track to do laundry day as opposed to, a load a day. And like that, it's funny how many people are like, I did not want to do laundry day. I thought that was the dumbest thing I had ever heard. And then I tried it and I'm like, it's my favorite thing ever.
Yeah, there's definitely pros and cons to both
Yep.
methods. And I think a lot of people who think that they have a load of laundry to do every day, it's kind of like with dishes, they are in denial. They don't realize they've got this pile up. And if they were doing a load every day, there might be days where they didn't even have enough for a full load.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I've found that to be true. Like I thought I had enough for a full load every day, but I really don't.
Well, and when you're behind on laundry, you don't know how much laundry you actually use in a week. Like that's, I always tell people if you're going to try laundry day, you have to give it 3 weeks because the first week is not laundry day. It's catching up on all the things that you didn't do in any emergency loads or whatever, like things that have been in the bottom of the hamper forever. So you're catching up on who knows how long. And then it might take you 6 days to do the first laundry day because you're catching up. But anything newly dirtied, don't add it to those piles. That stays in the hampers or wherever you keep your dirty clothes, because that second laundry day, even though you're like, I just finished on Saturday and it's Monday again and I got to do this again, but you start that laundry day and you're like, oh, this is a week's worth of laundry. Now I actually know how much laundry, how many clothes we wear in a week. And then the third laundry day is the one where, okay, that very small amount, comparatively, that was a week's worth of laundry, like I did that in a day or a day and a half. And now I've had almost an entire week where I didn't have to worry about, feel guilty about, think about laundry. That's the value of laundry day. But so many times people will argue with me and I'm like, you can't argue until you've tried it. It may be true that your family would have 13 loads in a week, but if you haven't tried it, you cannot know. You cannot know. When you're behind, how much actual laundry you create in a week.
Yeah, and you've done the experimenting for us. I like how in a lot of your episodes you talk about just time, how long it takes you to empty and reload the dishwasher. And I've actually done that, and sometimes it's like four minutes or something. Why would I put this off?
I know. I think I told this story in How to Manage Your Home Without Losing Your Mind. So my best friend, whose house is always under control. Like she does not struggle with this. But I still giggle when I think about it because she took a home ec class or something, and they had to write out the time of some kitchen task or whatever. And so it was divided into little things. And it was, and it was like, the first thing was put on your apron and turn on the light. And she put 15 minutes. And the teacher was like, think about this. And so I always think about 15 minutes, but I also go, this is easy for her, right? But I'm also like, how many times do we just not have any concept of how long something takes? I call it TPAD, time passage awareness disorder. Like, it's a made up by me thing, although other people have said there is something real, called time blindness or whatever. But I'm like, I call it TPAD. I tell you I made it up, but I'm like, it's real. Like, this idea of, I assume something's going to take forever, but yeah, like timing yourself on tasks is so powerful. Anytime where you're like, no, that would take forever. Try it once, experimentally time it. And once you know how long something takes, then you start to see these time moments in your day where you're like, I've got I actually know that I can empty the dishwasher in 4 minutes. So if I've got 5 minutes, then now that excuse is gone and it helps me actually do the thing.
So tell us a little bit about how to pre-order your book, your newest book, because I know it's still in the pre-ordering stage. I got a sneak preview of it, but I know it's still in the pre-order.
Yeah, so it comes out February 11th, and that's a Tuesday. All books come out on Tuesdays. I don't know if you knew that, but I don't. I'm still not quite
Well, if I was a
why.
published author, I'd know that. But
well, it's one of those things I was like, what? Really? Tuesdays? I've never noticed that before. But yeah, so it comes out on February 11th, and it is the spiritual side of things because I'm a Christian, and so I know how easy it is to kind of take this struggle and then maybe some things that we've heard, whether they were said intentionally or unintentionally in a way that may, spiritual guilt kind of come on. And I want to take that shame away and that spiritual guilt away by really diving in and understanding, like, how does Jesus feel about your messy house? So yeah, it's available for pre-order. I do have, I'm not sure when this is going to come out, but, I do have pre-order bonuses. So I have like a 5-day devotional and a preview of the book and invitations to some Q&A discussions that we'll do after the book comes out for those who pre-order. So you can just go to slobcomesclean.com/Jesus if you want to get the pre-order bonuses. And yeah, that's that.
it's definitely a must read, and whether someone is a Christian or not, they need to read this book.
Thank you.
And it has cleaning motivation just interwoven through it. Like, just somehow, like, I was putting it down to, like, get up and do something.
Oh, that makes me happy. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because, talking with my my PR team and stuff through the publisher, they're like, so you give decluttering tips? And I'm like, not really. But I do talk about some of my basic concepts that have helped me understand basic spiritual concepts as well. So it's not necessarily that I'm like encouraging you to get out there and do your dishes. I've already done that in my other books, right? Like, but in this one, I'm like, let's get into that. But yeah, it does. And I think that a lot of that inspiration comes from the freedom that happens when the shame is gone. Like shame is not inspiring. It's not motivating. And so removing that shame is often the thing that, brings about motivation.
Yeah, it's definitely a refresher on previous concepts, and it kind of ties in the whole Proverbs 31, and it's great.
Thank you.
They've got to read it. I'm going to be putting a link, of course, in the episode notes, or if you're watching on YouTube, in the description. It'll be there. I'll have all the information there for you to get that book. And she also has audiobooks. For those of us who like to listen to podcasts while we clean, audiobooks are definitely a must. And I'm listening to, it's not How to Manage Your Home, but it's the next one. I'm in the process of listening to that audiobook. What was that one again?
Decluttering at the Speed of Life.
Yes, I own the hard copy of How to Manage Your Home, and then I'm in the process of listening to Decluttering at the Speed of Life. And of course, I've been listening to your podcast since at least 2013. I'm not sure when I started, but that's a long time ago.
I think that's almost when it started. I really think.
Probably. I think your podcast was pretty new when I discovered it.
Yeah. I started a podcast before I'd ever listened to a podcast. I don't recommend that. But I was like, well, this sounds fun. I like talking into microphones, and I didn't edit it for those first 7-8 years, I think.
Another thing that I found really relatable, this is off the topic of cleaning, but how you started out anonymously, because I don't really want anyone I know to listen to my podcast or to know about it. But at this point, they've come across it. It is what it is. But when I started out, I didn't tell anybody.
Oh, which I think is actually helpful because, sometimes when you want your friends to like support you, then, and they're going to listen some or whatever, but it can be disappointing. It can cause some, but I was like, I didn't want anybody I knew to know what I was doing. And it's funny because, I always tell people, if you're going to search for me on the internet, put the K in the name, put Dana K. White, because there is a man who's the UFC guy. So if you just look up Dana White, you're not going to find me. I mean, you kind of do, a little bit down the line, but you have to put the K in there and then you'll find me everywhere. But it's nice because the people in my real life don't know that. And if they get like, Dana does this stuff online, and so they go and try to Google me and they don't know to put the K in there, because in my normal life, I don't really introduce myself as Dana K. White, and then they can't find me. And so I'm like, yes, it's my little shield of anonymity still with the people in my real life. Most people know what I do now, but anyway, it's fun.
Love it. So how old are your kids now? I remember they were a lot younger when I first started listening. Are they grown or almost grown?
They are 18, 21, and 23. So my youngest is in college. Well, all of them are in college, but my youngest just left for college this year. And it's funny because I made my YouTube videos. I make them all over the summer because my son is my editor, and he doesn't like to have to work on them at school, and I don't like to have to be like, have you finished that? So we do them all over the summer. So at the end of the summer, I was saying, I'm about to be an empty nester. I'm going to be an empty nester in a couple weeks or whatever. And so my younger two went off to college, and my oldest 2 days later said, hey, I think I'm going to move home for a little bit. And so we were empty nesters for 2 days. Right. And then, anyway, he's actually moving tomorrow again. So I think we'll actually be legit empty nester. I mean, I know they're still coming back, and it's not like they're completely gone, once they're in college. But yeah, so they were 3, 5, and 7 when I started this process. So I just heard from somebody who said, I've been listening to your podcast starting with the beginning ones, and it's so bizarre because you're talking about your kids being like 5, 7, and 9 or whatever. And then in your ads that come on, it mentions that, they're going off to college. And she's like, wait, what?
Yeah, I feel like I'm getting different things too, because I'm seeing you on different social media platforms, and I'm seeing different clips, but I knew it had been a long time.
Yeah.
So can you think of anything else that cleaning related?
Sure. Anything you want to talk about. Let's talk about the no mess method.
I'm just talking to you at this point.
No, and we can talk about the no mess method. Do you want to just talk about that it is possible to declutter without making a bigger mess?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say the number one thing that I have to offer, to share, is my no mess decluttering process, right? So every space in my home, was cluttered. And so I had to, and I was emotionally attached to all my stuff, so I had to come up with a way to work through my clutter. And so over time, I developed this 5-step process. And the thing that makes it different is that you'd never create a bigger mess, right? Like, so most of the time, well, what I used to think, which was the thing that would discourage me from decluttering, I used to think that you had to pull everything out of a space in order to declutter, right? Like, you're supposed to clear it out and then just put back the things that you want in the space. Well, I would do that. Like, I would pull everything out. I would look at the empty space and go, wow, it looks amazing, empty. And then I would turn around and all the stuff that I just pulled out is now everywhere. And I would shut down because it was just overwhelming. Or I would put a few things back and then I go, what do I do with the rest of this stuff? Like, it just didn't work for me. And so and I'm also a little more distractible than most people. So, getting distracted in the middle of a project is pretty much guaranteed for me to happen. So I started doing things in a way where I go one item at a time and I make a final decision about that item using my process, which is not emotional, right? Like, so it helps me make that decision. And then I act on that decision, meaning this space, I can work on it for 30 minutes. And it's not going to be done necessarily. I mean, some might be done in that amount of time, but the goal is not necessarily to finish this, but it's to make it better, right? And like the power of what you can do in 30 minutes when you're not setting things aside to do later, but instead, as I take something out, I ask myself, where would I look for this first? And when I answer that, I go take it there now. And that feels less efficient, except that I can literally stop at any time because I want to, or I don't even notice I'm stopping or whatever. And this space is better than it was before. It is not, half done. I don't have anything where I'm like, oh, I can't stop because I got to deal with this pile first or whatever. Because those piles, in my experience, would just sit there. And then they would morph into one big pile. And, so it just was so defeating. But when I changed and shifted my thinking to, I'm going to make this space better, I actually made the progress I had wanted all along when I had been imagining the big, dramatic decluttering project that I was going to do. But then it always backfired, or it backfired the last 3 times. And so now I'm putting it off because I'm just like, it never works. I never made the progress in my house when I had the big vision of what I wanted to do. And instead, when I said, I'm just going to make this space better, that was actually what brought my house to the point that I had always dreamed of. So make better your goal, because you cannot fail at better if you do anything at all. And there's something very powerful in that mindset shift. It feels like it can't be that powerful. Give it a try. Like, just try it and see. And I think it, will have a lot of positive effect.
I love that you developed a process that kind of takes the emotions out of it so that we aren't just crippled with anxiety about getting rid of stuff.
Yeah. Because I can't ask myself the questions that I would always hear other people asking about how I felt about something or if it was useful or whatever, because I'm always going to say yes. I'm a very creative person. And that creativity is directly related to my clutter struggles. I didn't know that before. Now I know that, right? And so the fact that my brain is creative is like, if you tell, if somebody else says, when are you going to use this? And I'm like, well, I'll find a way. And I'll find an extra hard way because you just acted like I couldn't find a way. And so now I'm, that's just my personality, right? Is I'm like, oh, I can list off 100 things I could do with that item, right? Like 100 things that make it, yes, useful. But that wasn't doing me any good, right? Like my house I had all these things that were greatly useful, but then I couldn't use them because I couldn't find them. I didn't have open space to actually be able to do the things that I'd collected them to do, so it was holding me back. So I had to have a different process. And that's why I have my non-emotional process that allows me to feel the emotions, but I'm not using them as my strategy.
Something you said there really resonated with me, because I feel like when I'm going through a drawer or something, instead of just going, yeah, I never use this, I should get rid of it, it's like, how can I start using this?
Yes, exactly. I mean, and it's funny because, so I have a YouTube video, I don't know when it came out, maybe a year ago or so, with my husband, and we're going through our mug shelf. He loves mugs. Like, they're all sentimental to him. But that also means when we go on vacation, he likes to get a mug. Well, you bring another mug home and now all of a sudden they don't fit on the shelf, So he had said when he bought the mug on vacation, he was like, I know which ones I'm going to get rid of. And so I was like, well, let's make a video then, right? So we were making the video. And so I was talking about, this container concept and how it helps me make those decisions, and how I was like, you just choose your least favorite. And he specifically was like, thank you for saying least favorite. Thank you for letting me call it a favorite. He was like, because if I just, am like, which item am I going to reject? Well, that's like, I don't want to reject these items, right? Like I feel feelings, and I feel like they maybe feel some feelings too, so it's like, it allows me to not reject the item, or not, force myself to say, I'll never use this. It's like, I absolutely might use it if it was, say, my house, but the reality is there's no space.
I like that. You're admitting that you like the item.
Yes. And that's the problem. As long as I was just keeping stuff based on whether I liked it or could use it, I was keeping everything, and then my house was out of control. So allowing myself to say, I do love this item, and yet it can't stay in my house, allowed me to finally make progress. Yeah. And blame the container. I'm like, I would keep it. It's the container. That's the bad guy here, right? Which is another thing that helps a lot when you have kids is, this is the space that we have. And it's like, oh, you want to keep that? Absolutely. What are you willing to get rid of so that there's space for it? Oh, you aren't willing to get rid of anything? Oh, that's so sad. I don't have to say, hello, this is a bad thing, because then that's what causes the power struggle, right? Between the mom and the child. It's like they hold on tighter because you're telling them that they shouldn't love this thing that they love. Instead, it's like, oh, absolutely, you can keep it. We just have to create space for it. So what are you willing to get rid of in order to keep it? And it works really well with other people. Yeah.
I like that. So we talked about the books, but what are all the things they can do to follow you?
So I do all the things. Sometimes I think maybe I do too many things, but I have a YouTube channel, so I put out YouTube videos every week. I have a podcast that comes out every week. Those both come out on Thursdays. If you search A Slob Comes Clean or Dana K. White, but if you go to aslobcomesclean.com, that is my website. You can also put in danakWhite.com, and it will take you there, and that has all of the places that you can find me online. I also train decluttering coaches to actually go in and help people in their homes, because that's the thing I just don't have the time to be able to do. So it's really fun to get to see people getting the help that they need. I think we have 60 coaches at this point. But most of them also coach virtually. And so you can work with that, work with somebody virtually, which it sounds like, oh, I want somebody, but they're coaches. Like, they're helping you make these decisions. And so it works really well virtually as well.
Okay, well, thank you so much for being a guest on my show. It was so amazing talking to you in person. I've been wanting to meet you for years.
Oh, this is so fun. Thank you so much for having me on.
So everybody, visit her website, buy her book, especially the new one. It's a must read, but I mean, they're all great, but the new one has a very important spiritual message as well as a housekeeping message.
Thank you.